Welcome back everyone. So as we saw about conditions in the last lecture and learned about how we can apply it on use case that we used, like checking the revenue of a company as whether it was staying in track or deviating a lot, so that it helped me take a decision to change the strategy of my company and accordingly my revenue can be changed. Right. However, if you have not seen that video yet, go to that video from the link given in the description below. Now let's say I have got revenues for each month. So I have made two lists over here. The A list contains the month number starting from January, which is A, to September, right? Whereas the B list consists of the revenues for all those months. Now let's say I just want to create two reports. First, an entire year or the period for which we have the data for. Second will be a half yearly report, which will consist of two reports in it. First will be a 6 month report and second will be of a 3 months report. Right. So let's start with the first report where we consider all the data that we have. Now for this report, can I do something that will help me loop over this entire list, which will help me understand where my revenue is getting low, let's say less than 20,000 rupees right now. As of now, I think I can surely index the values that are having revenue less than 20,000 just by looking at it. So let's say I'll consider my fifth index, my sixth index, my seventh index, and my eighth index. So I can say for almost 4 months, my revenue was less than 20,000 rupees. So it is 4 by 9, which gives me the probability or the time, which I would say for 44% of the time, I had my business revenues down. But did you just see what we did right now? So over here, we are just inferring based on the manual calculations that I did. That is probably because the number of months and the data right now is very less, and you can just read it literally, right? But would it work if I have data for almost 30 months or even more than that? No, right? I would go nuts about it. So for comparing, can I try something like, let's say B is greater than 20,000? Maybe do it like this. No, right? I get a type error saying the greater than is not supported between instances of less than end. Now, this happened because Python is not understanding whether you have to compare every parameter of that particular list with that number or so. Because Python cannot just compare each and every values in that particular list with a particular number. Right. So for this kind of things or this kind of analysis, we usually use a for loop, right? So that we can iterate over each values inside that particular list and do some analysis accordingly. In this case, we can compare now. So I'll just remove it. Understand this, a for loop processes each item in a sequence. So it is used with Python sequence data types such as strings, lists, and tuples that we learned about before, right? Now each item in turn is reassigned to the loop variable whichever you provide. You can choose anything except a keyword, and the body of the loop is always executed. Now the general form of a for loop looks something like this, right? Now this is just another example of a compound statement in Python, and like the branching statement, it has a header terminated by a colon and a body, right? Now a body consisting of a sequence of one or more items can be indented with the same amount from the header. In this case, we have statement 1 and statement 2, which are indented similarly, either by 4 spaces or a single tab. Alright, so the loop variable is created when the for statement runs, so you do not need to create the variable before that explicitly. Now each iteration assigns the loop variable to the next element in the sequence and then execute the statements in the body. The statement finishes when the last element in the sequence is reached. So this kind of flow is basically called a loop because it loop backs around to the top after each iteration. Okay, we'll just go step by step to do the first report, right? So as for the first step, over here I'll just create a for loop which will just iterate over the entire revenue list B and print as to check what values I'm getting, right? So you see over here my loop variable I, which I have provided, is basically traversing over the sequence and assigning it and just printing it, right? So you see, I have just got the entire values of list B. But do I really want that? Do I really want all the values that are present in list B? No, right? We just wanted those values which are less than 20,000 rupees. So for that, in step 2, I'll just add a basic if condition saying it will print only if the value in that particular list is less than 20,000 rupees, right? So you see, I have just added if right before my print statement. So if I now run this, you see the values only for which my values are less than 20,000 rupees will be printed and not apart from those. So I filtered those. But now you see, as for my step 3, I want the months or the count of months for which my actual revenue was less than 20,000 rupees, right? So for that, what we'll do is we have just created a basic variable count starting with 0, and I'll just try to increment it every time my condition, that is the value of in that particular list, is less than 20,000. It will just increment at that point only, right? So if I run this and print the value of count, I'll get the number of months for which my revenue value was less than 20,000 rupees, right? Here again, I just wanted all those months for which I knew that the revenue was less than 20,000 rupees, so that I can do the analysis for that particular month, right? But since I don't have the months inside the same list, I'll just use the indexes of this list and access it on the months list A. So for that, we need to use enumerate. Now to understand how enumerate exactly works is, it just returns me a tuple of index and the value of that index in the list. It won't return me a particular value in the list itself. So that's exactly why I provided two loop variables over here, j and I, so that we can unpack accordingly. Now, when I run this, you see it just gave me two values, right? First one is the index that is being applied on that particular list B, and second is the value at that particular index. So now that I know of my indexes and I know the revenues that are linked to the same month of that particular same indexes, I can write something like this, right? Where I'm just calling for that particular index itself in the months list. So now if I run this, I'll just get the months number. Now you can also use another loop for inside a for loop, but remember it will then run for m into n instances, where my m is the length of the first list and n is the length of second list, right? So as for the second report, I'll just leave that up to you right now, that you can try at your end. We'll discuss that in the next lecture. So just a tip for that, all right, enumerate will come very handy for that thing, right? So as with all the examples you see in this notebook, you should try this code out yourself and see what it does. You should also try to anticipate the results before you do and create your own related examples and try them out as well. Okay, now if you get the results you expected, pat yourself on the back and move on. That's great. But if you don't worry about it. Try to figure out why it didn't happen, because this is the essence of the scientific method and is essential if you want to think like a computer programmer. Okay, now oftentimes you will want to loop that iterates a given number of times, or that iterates over a given sequence of numbers. The range function come in handy for that. So I think I'll just put a pause button right now at this point, and we'll learn about range functions and while loop in great detail in the second part of this lecture. All right, so do like, share, comment, subscribe, and tell me what you think about this video. If this is helpful, share with your friends. Okay, and stay tuned to Programming Kida for the next part of this video. All right, thank you guys. Keep learning.